We're here at OSCON 2014 here with Chris DiBona from Google. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm swell. How are you?
Doing all right. So what we're interested in is primarily what Google is doing and what exciting things are happening with Google and open source. Can you tell me a little bit about the projects that Google is involved in, or the things that Google is planning on getting involved in, some of the plans Google may have?
Plans. You know, the thing I like to talk about when people ask me this question is, your viewers probably already know about things like Chromium and Android and the rest, but over the last year we've seen a pretty remarkable uptake on tools like AngularJS and Karma, which is a testing project for JavaScript, and those sorts of things. From a stuff that Google releases perspective, they're really, really exciting. From an external perspective, like things we've funded and work we're doing with outside groups, we actually just did our big meeting and funded the Core Infrastructure Initiative at the Linux Foundation, which is focused on anticipating and averting problems like the OpenSSL bugs that we saw earlier in the year, and trying to find future OpenSSL bugs, or not OpenSSL bugs, but bugs of that caliber that are lurking within our shared code bases. So that's what we're trying to do, And then, of course, Summer Code is hitting our 10th year now, and we're very excited about that, and that's been a pretty great thing. I'll ask your cameraman to pan. These are all the groups we've helped over the last 10 years, by providing students for them. And we can come back in now, it's all right. And, so we've had over 8,000 students take part in the project now over the last 10 years, and it's incredible, it's the kind of terrific developers we've found, and working with the open source projects listed here, that we've been able to create new sort of core open source people, and it's very invigorating, right? So
yeah, and that's outstanding that Google has such a commitment to helping other people get involved. Can you talk a little bit about how Google uses open source internally, maybe? What things is Google doing? I mean, if you can share that.
Sure. Yeah, no, we use open source everywhere. Whether it's libraries that enable functionality anywhere across the product line to kernels. It's funny, if you measure things in, say, size of distributions, between Chrome OS and Android and Google TV and Google Fiber and Google Glass and all these other things, we have something like 9 Ubuntu-sized distributions at Google that we maintain now and have created. And then we have other distribution forks in some ways, where we take like a distribution like Ubuntu, make it work on our network. And so we both use code in the creation of our services. We also use platforms and the rest. So we just use it vastly, and it's one of the reasons why we feel like we have an obligation to be there for open source, whether it's through these organizations or through funding work like the Summer Code, or by releasing source code, which is the purest way of taking part.
So I have to ask, you brought up Google Glass.
Sure.
Now I have gotten...
I know you're wearing one.
Yeah, I am.
Are you recording right now?
Not on the Glass.
Because there's a symbol now. You go like this. No, I'm kidding.
No, so I get nonstop flack for wearing Glass anytime I conduct an interview, right?
Oh, okay.
And I just decided, if I'm interviewing somebody from Google, it's only appropriate to wear Glass, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You'd have to.
Well, I don't know if you'd have to, but...
Well, don't you feel a little awkward not having Glass on?
Not really. So the thing is about, I recently got LASIK, so I wore glasses for years.
Sure.
And so I sort of enjoying the feeling of not having to wear glasses for the first time in 41 years of my life. Well, I don't think I wore glasses as an infant, so 39 years, right? But, so I like not wearing it. But it's not because I don't like glass. But I think it's fine that you're wearing it. Do other people like getting your junk about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I hear about it constantly. But I guess...
do they think it's duplicative because you're recording here and you could be recording there? Why don't you just record from there? Like, did you ever see the new Battlestar Galactica? There's that scene where President Rosalind is giving her "I'm the President Now" speech or whatever, and there's people like wearing like the action cams, and it was really kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think people just find it somewhat distracting.
Sure. The world's going to adjust to these kinds of things. Nobody thinks twice about, microphone being put in their face, but they don't think twice about cell phones. They don't think twice about these kinds of things. So yeah, we'll get there, or we won't. maybe it'll take longer, maybe it'll take less time. But
So what things is Google doing with wearable computers or small portable electronics that that maybe involves open source? Everyone makes fun of it, but really it's running Linux, right?
no, it's running Linux. It's running actually a fair amount of the Android stack, and so does Android Wear, the watches. I hate to say it, there's a distribution. I just see these things as new distributions, right? And we try to have some commonality, not just at the kernel level, but in the case of both Class and Android Wear, they have a lot of commonality with Android, right?
Sure. Right.
And so, I think that's very exciting, and from a compliance standpoint, it's interesting too, because early on in Android's creation, we spent a lot of time in my group making sure that it was very easy to make a compliant Android device, meaning it would show the right license information when you went to the right screen and all the rest. So for instance, one of the things you can do with the Class is you can basically fling open up the legal information on my phone kind of thing. Right. So you knew where your software comes from and what was inside it. So yeah, the myopia that I enjoy at Google is I look at everything as a compliance issue. I look at everything as a compliance challenge. Sure. How can I create devices with unusual user interfaces and still present the information that I need to present? And that's always very interesting and challenging. Like Chromecast is a great example of this.
Right.
How do you show legal information on a Chromecast? It has no buttons, it has no screen until you plug it into a bigger screen. And isn't that bigger screen just another Linux device made by Samsung or LG or whoever?
Right.
So you go and you can get sort of lost in the forest, the labyrinth of licenses and the rest. And so in the case of Chromecast, you basically fling you can in the controlling application is where you find the legal information. So anyway.
Now, how do you see the adoption of Android as compared to things like Apple's iOS? I mean, there's a lot of people that I see a lot of iPhones here at OSCON, and that kind of surprises me.
Yeah.
What if anything is Google doing to try and push Android to be more in the mobile space? I mean, have we overtaken the iOS market share yet?
Well, I think that Sundar mentioned that we were sitting at 84% worldwide market share.
Okay.
And over 1 billion devices.
Wow.
And so we overtook iOS a long time ago.
Okay.
And the thing is, though, I don't really care.
Yeah.
When I look at iOS, I look at the applications that we shipped on it and the functionality that Google brings to the Apple platform, and I'm actually really proud of that. So, and there's a lot of open source in that platform too, not just in our applications, but the way that Apple uses open source. They don't share as much of that back, although their presence in the LLVM project has been incredible, right? So, I have mixed feelings simply from an open source perspective, but from a computational perspective, it's an interesting device, right? Sure. But yeah, Android, though, it's just a whole different world. I mean, the thing about the 1 billion devices that Sundar mentioned at Google I/O during his keynote that a lot of people sort of didn't parse was that he was just talking about the devices that register with Google, That's not counting the hundreds of millions of other devices that ship in fractional shares from Chinese factories, the Amazon Kindle Fire. Those things are all Android too.
Right.
And it's like, this is how you know that Android is really open source.
Yes.
This is how you know that Chromium is really open source, because other people ship it.
Right.
And we're not going, oh no, you can't ship it, because we're not that company. We really shipped it under a real open source license that people could use. And it's kind of cool.
Now, do you think that providing that level of freedom also provides the ability for companies to abuse it? So, for example, when I bought my Verizon Samsung phone, I have a lot of Verizon apps. I have a lot of stuff I didn't really want on the phone that isn't really part of the Android experience. It's just Verizon wanted that stuff on there, and the ability for those OEMs to modify that operating system could be seen as a detraction for some users, right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I hate to say it. But that's a problem winners have. Your platform's winning when you have those kinds of problems. Fragmentation is a problem winners have.
Okay.
And I think that open source was so used to losing. Like losing the desktop, losing this, losing that, even though we had done such a great job winning in the server, that feeling the win in a consumer market felt like betrayal for some people. And the thing is, if you look at the Verizon builds, if you look at it's funny, actually, I don't want to sound like I'm betraying my people, but I actually prefer the Moto X build to the stock Nexus build right now because it has this really cool feature where you can shake it and take a picture.
Yeah.
So you don't have to worry about unlocking it in other ways. So I can whip it out of my pocket while shaking, like like I'm having a seizure. But it's fine though, and then I can take my picture really fast. And I really like that feature, and I really like the Bluetooth Trust feature in the Moto X. And those are things that Motorola brought to it. And Motorola is not part of Google anymore, so I'm not just kissing corporate butt here. Right. And I think that it's not wrong to try to excel by adding new things to an operating system. Now, I would love if those were open source and brought back into the platform, or they were available through an app or whatever. And that brings its own challenges, right? I would hope, and I would think that the Verizons and the carriers of the world would endeavor to ensure that those things are secure. When I'm most saddened by that sort of creativity, which normally is very inspiring to me. It is. It's really great for me. Is when they don't follow through on security, when they don't follow through on UI, and that sort of thing. And that's when it's too bad, right? But at the same time, I'd rather see the creativity than not. And it's the hallmark of a varied and interesting platform that we have it. So, and that's why I'm also pretty unimpressed by fragmentation arguments and that kind of thing. And I'm like, you know what? In the open source world, everything's a fork. Every time you ship a distribution, every time you ship a program, you're forking it. You're putting a moment in time, and you're sticking with that moment until they upgrade again, or until the app get update, or you're forking every time you do that. So the measure of us as programmers, or as app developers, or as carriers, or handset manufacturers, is how we keep up with those updates, how we keep bringing the future of software development to our users, right? And that's why Android's at 84%, right? Is because no matter what you think about Android, if you think that it's not as whatever iOS is, it's always moving forward, because everyone is competing to move it forward all the time. And that's what's great about it, and that's why I love it. So, and that's how we structured it from the beginning.
So that was Google's design philosophy, is what you're saying?
Well, I mean, we released under the Apache license because we wanted carriers, we wanted handset manufacturers, and we wanted other users who we had no way of anticipating to know that they had the chance to use Android in ways they could never use iOS. iOS was never going to get licensed to them in that way.
Right. No, absolutely not.
And
Apple controls the stack from top to bottom, and that's the way they want it.
And that's the kind of users they want. They don't want the kind of users that want to experiment, that want extra functionality.
Don't worry how it works. We'll tell you how it works, or we won't tell you how it works. We'll make it work. You just trust us that it'll work.
That's right. That's right. And obviously that's fine for the people who want that level of functionality. If you want something different, though, it's very challenging to do that on iOS. You either have to jailbreak or you have to do something else. And in our world, it was saying, well, if you want to go buy some crazy triple SIM phone, if that's what works for you, Android can support that, and so they'll probably ship Android on that because they're not going to ship Symbian on it. They're not going to ship any of these other things on it. A lot of people don't realize this, but back in 2005, 2006, when people were still shipping Windows CE on phones, first of all, they weren't using Windows Mobile because it was 50 cents more a copy. And on Windows CE, they would write their own dialing applications that would support multiple SIMs. And so you'd buy these funny these funny phones in China and Shenzhen and Beijing and Shanghai and these malls, and they'd be like, hey, and of course they'd say it's an iPhone, they'd say it's something else, but what it really was running Windows CE with a custom interface, and it was supporting those crazy SIMs and all the rest. Nowadays, though, they're like, you know what? We didn't have to play any games. We just used Android. We made it work, and here it is. And that's really freeing, right? I mean, absolutely. Nicolas Charbonnier, the guy who runs the ARM Devices blog, he was showing me around Shenzhen. He's like, there's probably about 3 million people in Shenzhen alone just working on Android. Android phones, Android tablets, Android devices. And it's like, that's amazing, and it's just remarkable. And I'm really proud that Google is part of that, so, yeah.
Well, the open source community really appreciates having such a strong player in the game, no doubt. Is there anything else you'd like to add about anything that Google's doing, or maybe information where somebody could go if they wanted to find out more about Google and open source?
Sure. If they type in Google and open source in Google, they'll find us pretty readily. It's just if they go to developers.google.com/open source, you'll find our programs, including the Summer of Code and Google Code-In. So if any of your listeners have college students in their lives, or are college students, or if they're 13 to 18 for Google Code-In, that's going to hit in the December timeframe, November-December timeframe. And we want to help people get into open source, and we have ways of doing that for people 13 through adulthood.
Sure.
So yeah, I would go there.
Well, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate having you.